Okay, welcome back to Mental Toughness Podcast.org. I'm Steve Siebold, your host. And remember to subscribe to the podcast by going to Mental Toughness Podcast.org and subscribe, and we'll send you an email with a new episode. Once a week it comes out. Don't want you to miss any episodes. Okay, so Mental Toughness Podcast.org. All right, so let's talk about the power of identifying your emotional motivators and basically what drives you on an emotional level to get what you want. Now, if you're coaching someone, it's about them. If it's you as a performer, it's about you. Okay, so figure it that way. Kind of wear the appropriate hat. So emotional motivators basically are what drive people more than anything else when it comes to motivation. We say it this way: use emotion to motivate yourself and logic to steer. I'll say it again: emotion to motivate, logic to steer. Don't ever confuse or use the two at the same time. Okay, so you want to separate these things completely. So logic to steer, strategy, all those kinds of things, that's a different show. Now we're talking emotional motivation. What drives people to do what they do? Well, if we really break it down, like we have over 35 years, it's something that people want to feel. In other words, they buy the car, or I should say we buy the car, because we're a collective, psychologically as human beings. We buy the certain car because, not necessarily because of the car itself, but because the way we feel, we think we're going to feel in the car. Same with the house. We buy the house because we think we're going to feel a certain way when we live in that house. And you could say this, just fill in the blank. Why do women have so many shoes? Well, there's a feeling they get when they have the certain shoe on, whether it's a red bottom shoe, like a Louboutin, or it's something else, they have a thing for shoes sometimes. Women have a thing for shoes. Guys have things for, different jackets, maybe a leather jacket, because they feel like they're gonna feel a certain way when they wear this jacket or this jewelry, or, fill in the blank. It doesn't matter what it is. Why does someone strive to become a successful business person? Is it just the money? It's usually not. Not when you do exit interviews with people, that's not typically what they say. Some people say, well, it's great, the money's great. But typically it's because they want to see themselves and feel about themselves in a certain way. And if they're successful, they think they'll feel good about themselves. Think about it. Most people are told they can't do things. They're not good enough. They're not smart enough. They're not tall enough. They're not short enough. They're not work hard enough. They don't do this enough or that. None of us are really affirmed. Not too many people are affirmed enough in their life. So whether they're kids or they're adults, they've just been told they can't do things. There's been negative surrounding them their whole life. So to try to make up for it, a lot of times we do it through achievement, because our emotional motivator is, I want to feel like all those people that told me I wasn't good enough. I want to feel that they were wrong. That I am good enough. That I am smart enough. That I am disciplined enough. That I am fill in the blank. I want to feel a certain way. So that's what drives me. Now, if you're coaching someone, this is critical that you know this, because you don't talk to a logic-based motivation like money. Money is not really a great motivator for most people. It is for some people. But once you make a certain amount where you're not really starving and you're not worrying about every penny you spend, which is not that much money, then for most people, then it's not a great motivator, because you realize after a while that when you get the bigger house, it's kind of like the smaller house, except it's a little larger. Like the kitchen's a little bigger and the bathroom's a little bigger. It's a little fancier. It's a little better neighborhood. It's more expensive, of course, but it's still a house. It's still a place you sleep and you eat, and you use the kitchen and the living room. You watch TV, and it's still a house. It's just a bigger house. It's a fancier house. Has more status, but it's still a house. And you buy a car, and you buy a fancier car, and you go, well, it's still a car. It just takes me from one place to the other. And you realize there's not a lot of juice left in that stuff. It's fun to have, but when it really comes to driving behavior, is it enough? The answer for most people is no. It's not enough. So what is enough? Emotion. You got to find out what makes you tick or what makes the person you're coaching tick on an emotional level. I write books, and I consider myself more than anything else. I consider myself a writer. As I've been writing articles for magazines since I was 10 years old. I used to enter contests for magazines when I was a kid. I used to write short stories as a kid, enter short story contests. I won all kinds of awards as a kid doing that. I mean, small time stuff, nothing major. But I liked it. I always liked writing. And so I've written a lot of books. I've written 12 books, and I've written dozens of op-eds and all kinds of articles and all that stuff. So I consider myself more of a writer. Even though I made most of my money speaking, I've spoken about what I've written about. That was the catalyst, is the writing. So when people say, well, what motivates you to take on a book project, to write a book? Well, what motivates me emotionally is, of course, not the money. It's not the money, because you got to sell a lot of books to make a lot of money. And so it's not the money. It's the idea that I can think something, put it in a book, put it on paper, which eventually goes into a book, and that book potentially goes all around the world and gets printed in multiple languages. And people are reading it while I'm sleeping somewhere in the world. Those books are being sold and read every single day. I don't know what it is about that. I just get the biggest kick out of it. That's my biggest kick I've ever gotten in the speaking writing business. I don't know why. I don't know what that says about me. Maybe it says I'm weird. I don't know. But that drives me like nothing else. I speak and write, but the thing I like to do the most is write. I love it when the words go around the world. I just get the biggest kick out of that. That I can think something, put it in a book, and it influences someone's life. Not everyone likes what I write, and no one, there's no one who writes and everyone likes it, but some people do, and it makes a difference. And I won't meet 99% of these people ever, but it changes people's lives sometimes, and it influences them and, makes them think a different way, whatever it is, whatever the benefit is. But I get the biggest emotional charge out of that, which is the reason I'm going to write until I die. I may not give speeches till I die, but I'm going to write until I die. There's no question about that. And so as long as I can. And so that's my emotional motivator. It was never about the money. It was never about selling a lot of books. It was just about that one thing. So I know that that's my motivation, which is an intrinsic motivation. It's an inner motivation. It's not an outside motivation. It's not to buy a new toy or make a bunch of money or something that can be fleeting, because it doesn't have enough depth into it to really be worth the struggle. My old friend J.D. Phillips likes to say, is the juice, asks the question, is the juice worth the squeeze? He's a North Carolina boy, and he comes up with all these euphemisms and whatnot, Southern euphemisms that are funny. He's a funny guy, and it's a good question. Is the juice worth the squeeze? Is it worth putting in all that effort for some material, extrinsic sort of reward? I don't know. It might be for you. I don't think it's got a lot of sustain when it comes to motivation, but emotional motivators do. There's just no end to the sustain an emotional motivator can provide. The key is you got to find out what yours is. And it's really a matter of asking yourself enough questions. If you're coaching someone, facilitating the introspective process and asking them what they care about, what they'll fight for, what they'll die for. You got to find out, So I think, and one of the ways you do it as a coach is you look into your own life and you say, what drives me? Because you're going to be the biggest expert on yourself, on your own thinking. So what drives you emotionally? What made you want to do the biggest things you've ever done in your life that really were hard? Or you had to make a huge commitment to, like being married, for example. Let's go another totally different direction, but still emotional motivator. I think you probably marry someone because you're thinking this is for a lifetime. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't for a lifetime, right? But when you get married, you're certainly thinking for a lifetime, because why would you get married if you wouldn't think lifetime, right? You're thinking, I'm so emotionally connected to this person that I can't imagine living my life without him or her. I just can't imagine, because there's so much emotional the strength when you think about the scenario of spending your whole life with this person, that you're actually willing to commit to a lifetime of being with this person, maybe having kids with this person, right? Making every major decision in your life with this person, sacrificing for this person, all these things. That's a big emotional motivator. So you look back on your life, the big decisions you made, and say, what was the driver? What made me do it? When I think about the 18 years I spent Well, I mean, really, it was about 16 straight years that I spent training to be a professional tennis player, and 2 years that I played on the minor league pro circuit. And I thought, that's like, if you've ever done that in any sport, it's just, you just have to be, you have to train like an animal. I mean, it is just abusive. I remember being out there when I was like 20 years old, 6 hours a day in the heat, training in Atlanta, in Florida. 6 hours a day. It's 95 degrees. It's 110 on the hard court, and you're out there 6 hours a day thinking this is it's just brutal, but you have to do it to be able to compete. There's no way you can compete with the best players in the world unless you can do that day in and day out. And I suppose if you're number one in the world and you're getting results, it's great. But when you're a minor leaguer like I was, you're just barely hanging on financially and all that kind of thing. But I look back and think about all those years when I did that as a kid as well. I sacrificed a normal childhood. I didn't live like normal kids. That's why I ended up being, I think a different kind of thinker than most people. Not better or worse, just different. Because you live as an athlete training like that as a 6 and 7, 8-year-old, 10-year-old kid, especially in a solo sport like tennis, you develop a mentality where you rely on yourself completely for everything. Emotionally, strategically, you have all these people around you telling you stuff. But when you're on the tennis court, you have to make those decisions, and no one can make them for you. They can't even coach you from the sidelines in tennis. And then when you win, it's no problem. When you lose, then you have to deal with all that, and you have to reconcile. And everyone's coming at you telling you what you did wrong, and you're trying to figure it out, and you feel guilty, and you let people down, and your coaches, and your trainers, and your parents, and it's a whirlwind of emotion and psychology for a child to be able to navigate. So you become, something a little bit different. You're thinking of these things where most kids are out there in my day riding their bikes around and riding their skateboards around, and maybe their mini bikes or go-karts and jumping ramps in the street with their bicycles and, playing on the slip and slide and doing this, playing baseball, football, whatever, just goofing around and having a good time. And you're out there training your butt off. And I'm not making a play like that was a big sacrifice because I wanted to do it. So my point is, I look back at that and think, why did I do it? Why didn't I want that easier life? Well, the emotional motivator was I loved playing tennis. It was never about winning. Just like business is usually not about money. It was always about playing the game. I loved playing the game. I just think tennis is a fascinating game. I still do to this day. It's the physical equivalent of chess, which I also love. I started playing chess when I was 4 years old. I played chess all through competitive chess in high school and not college, but I played in junior high school and high school. I was on a chess club and played in chess tournaments, just school stuff, small time stuff. But I like the game, love the game. And tennis is kind of like that as well. It's just a chess match. It's just very physical. And it takes a lot of skill and a lot of endurance and all those kinds of things, and quickness and agility and reflexes and all that type of stuff. It's a very, very difficult game to play well, and I love that, and that's why I did it. It was for nothing else. It was not to win. I love to win. Everyone loves to win, like everyone loves to make money. But the driver wasn't the winning, and the driver usually is not the money. The driver was the love of the game. What's your driver? What emotionally gets you going to the point where you'll do things that people say, why would you put yourself through that? It seems so difficult. You must be so disciplined. I used to get that all the time. I get that all the time now with books. People say, you spend a year to a year and a half writing a book. How many drafts do you do? My God, your discipline level must be unbelievable. No, it's not my discipline level. I love doing it. That's the emotional driver. I wish I could tell you I'm just so disciplined, but I'm not. I'm not that disciplined in things I don't want to do, like most people. But when I love it, it doesn't take discipline. So you got to look at, I think the way you look at your drivers is, or someone you're coaching, their emotional motivators or their emotional drivers, is you look at what they've done in the past and then say, why did you really do it? Don't give me the answer you think I want to hear. Give me the answer, the real answer. I love to play tennis, man. You think, why do these guys, for example, Paul McCartney's a great example. All right. Paul McCartney just turned 80 years old. Okay, Paul McCartney's been playing music professionally for, I would say, 63, 64 years since he was a kid. 64 years, and he's still touring around the world. Of course, he still sells out. I saw him a few years ago. I've seen him maybe 5 times. He's unbelievable. He still sounds like he did back when he was playing with the Beatles. I mean, this is a lifetime ago, you know? I mean, this guy was playing concerts before I was born, and I'm 57 years old. It's unbelievable, and he's still great. Why? And obviously, he's a. I think McCartney's probably close to a billionaire. He never started playing for the money. He plays because he loves to play. If you've ever seen McCartney play live up close, like I was in the second row in Miami one year, Dawn and I, my wife and I, and he looked like a little kid. He's playing piano on the ground floor. Then he had about 3 or 4 stairs going up to his. He played guitar, bass guitar on the main floor. Then he had 3 or 4 stairs going up to the piano where he'd play the piano songs. Then he'd run back down the stairs and play guitar. Like he looked like a 10-year-old kid in a Chuck E. Cheese or something. Like the guy was having a blast. He looked like he was having the time of his life. That's why he travels around the world at 80 years old. He obviously not doing it for the money or any other reason. This guy loves to play music for the sake of music. The most pure form of motivation is love. It doesn't get any better than that. When someone loves to do something, try talking them out of it. So if you can find what they love to do, if you're coaching them, if it's you, find what you love to do. That's why they always say, do what you love to do. Try to figure out a way to get paid for it. Pretty good advice. Doesn't always work, but it's pretty good advice. Even if you take a major pay cut and you say, well, I'm never going to be rich doing this. I remember when I was in college, I loved Abraham Maslow. I loved all of Maslow's stuff just fascinated me, and I was not fascinated by almost anything in college except Maslow. And so I was going to major in psychology and be a psychologist. And so, plus I was in the mental toughness because I was an athlete. I was playing Division I tennis. And, we were top 20 in the country and all that. I was an all-state player in high school 2 years in a row. And so, I was always into the psychological space. And I went to the dean of the psychology department at my college, University of South Alabama in Mobile. And I said to him, I really want to do this. Can you give me any advice? And he said, I wouldn't do it, meaning become a psychologist. And this is what he said to me. This is terrible advice. Terrible advice from this guy. He said, I wouldn't do it. And I said, you're a doctor of psychology, you're dean of the department. Why wouldn't you do it? He said, here's why. You're going to work your butt off and study your butt off, and you're never going to get fat doing it. I said, you mean I'm never going to get rich doing it? He said, yes, you're never going to get rich doing it. It's so much work for so little money. That's probably the worst advice I ever got from someone in a senior position. I didn't come in there because I wanted to get rich. If I wanted to get rich, I'd have studied finance and gone on Wall Street if that's all I cared about was money, right? And a lot of those people don't just care about money. They like finance. Okay, that's another story in itself. But I wanted to study psychology because I was fascinated with psychology. Not because I wanted to get rich. He's talking to me about getting rich, and I'm talking about doing psychology. And honestly, and I hate to say this because I'm not ashamed of it. I was only like 19 years old or 20 years old, but I took his advice. And I didn't become a psychologist. I don't regret not becoming a psychologist, but I've worked with hundreds of psychologists, some of the top ones in the country, luckily, over the years for their research, so I could sell that research back to corporate America, which I have done. And they laugh about it, especially Martin Seligman, who's one of the top psychologists of the 20th and 21st centuries. And he laughs about that every time I talk to him, because he says, you take our research we do in the Ivy League, we spend millions of dollars on research at the University of Pennsylvania and Harvard and Stanford and Yale and all these great universities, and guys like you take the research, we give away for free, we publish for free, and you sell it to corporate America. And I said, Marty, that's the way you do it. He goes, I got you, kid. That's the way you do it. He goes, you're right. He goes, I totally get it. And we've laughed about that 3 or 4 times over the years. But going back to it, I didn't become a psychologist. I don't regret it, but that was terrible advice. So it's about the emotion. Look back at your life, look at the person in your coaching's life, and say, what did they do that was so extreme in their life? Like, did they practice something? Like I had friends that practice guitar. Like I always play guitar. I'm a 3-chord hack. I have been for 40 years because I never really dedicated myself to it. I don't have that much talent for it either. But I know guys that sat in their room their entire college career, high school career, and just played guitar. And when they got an amp, it was like the greatest thing ever. And then they plugged in and they just sat there and played guitar. And today they play in bands or they play part-time or whatever. And they just love the guitar and they're great guitar players. And people said, you got to be kind of a weird guy, some kind of an introverted weirdo to sit in your room for 4 hours a day and play guitar. Oh, not at all. What you have to be is in love with playing guitar. That's what you have to be. You're not a weirdo. You're just someone that loves playing guitar. You know, they love it. They don't sit there because they're weird. They sit there because they love it, you know? And so you look at extreme examples like that and you say, what's the motivator? It's usually love. Love is the strongest one. There are other emotional motivators, but love is the strongest one. So dissect it for yourself, dissect it for someone you're coaching if you're coaching someone. And when you find those emotional motivators, attach your new goals to those motivators and watch results follow. Don't follow logic-based motivators. Emotion is where all the power is. All right, so we're out of time today. I appreciate you guys listening. Remember to subscribe at mentaltoughness podcast.org, and we'll see you next episode.